Welcome to DeadManTalkings. Tonight's show is a compilation of 2 short horror stories sent to me by my fantastic subscribers and friends. As ever, please do let us know down below in the comments what you thought. Please do like and share, and of course, don't forget to hashtag TeamFEAR. If you have a story you'd like to share with us here on the show, of course, please do get that over to myself on a website, which is www.DMTForestofFear.com. And so, without further ado, let's get into tonight's story, entitled When the 3 of us decided to go camping out in the woods. Let's get straight into that. When the 3 of us decided to go camping out in the woods, we imagined it as a retreat / real survival, total live off the land stuff for a week in August. We decided we should hire a guide to be there with us all the time to help us with the things we were not sure about that were within the alpine forested river region. Even though we were a tiny stone throw away from it our whole lives, hell, we could afford it. All 4 of us were making 6 figures from the beneficiary of our parents who helped set up the whole town. There was Carl, whose father cleared 50 acres of mountainside, with lots of excavation and levelling, in a feat that everyone said was impossible, to create his dream, a stunning mountaintop golf course in a pristine high-altitude setting, which has never really been equalled. Carl's father reportedly inherited his money from a long line of animal poachers that settled in the region before the government got there. And by the time the government did get there, they'd acquired enough wealth to control it. There was Jeannie, whose mother stirred up such a fuss about the town's fishing industry that she convinced the city council to pass a series of laws over 20 years to create 2 large dams on the river, which was great for the fish and the rich fishermen, but not so great for the fishermen downstream who fished for free, for subsistence. They were all bought out at a fair price and left the area. Both dams were at a local high point, made it almost impossible for anyone to fish there illegally, unless they were willing to hike almost up a mile at a 70% grade. But it was the boating business that brought Jeannie's family money, as Jeannie's mum secured exclusive boating licensing rights to the 2 man-made lakes for 30 years in the deal with the town. There was Dave, our guide, whose father Dwayne made sure all of the inside deals at the city's formation went through, stifling any and all protests. He wasn't an intrinsically bad man, but he wasn't very educated or skilled at anything else, and he knew that the moment he let any one of the rich people in town down, he'd be gone, and so he never did. There were several low rumours of him shooting people who got in the way, which were quickly explained as the results of transient criminals, and he always shot them in the woods, which the town owned, so technically, if anyone saw anything, they would have been trespassing. My name is Paul. My father was the Dean of Big Hill College, designated the only nationally accredited college in America, in a town with a population of under 5,000 people. He maintained 3 separate doctorates in animal husbandry, agricultural crop rotation, and podiatry. When I was growing up, if I wanted to spend time with him, I had to go with him on his interminable projects of interest. And I did. There were tests with herds of different animals at different elevations to see how they fared. There was a fish breeding lab of local fishers, with 2 or more stockings of the river and the town's lakes with the fish to ensure their survival each year. There was a monthly community meeting at the town hall, where he'd examine any citizen's feet and then dispense to them free medical advice, and he was continually leading a program to plant all kinds of crops in the region, which weren't native, but he would sure do well there, all year round. In fact, in 2 consecutive plantings, he serendipitously created a hybrid of rutabaga and a wild onion, which had an enormous resistance to the cold and would grow all 12 months of the year, and it had a lovely red flower. He named it the Big Red. We weren't more than 10 minutes into the early evening of our first night camping into the woods when we heard a horrendous cry. After we heard that mournful howl, that seemed too loud to be coming from across the river, which it had to be. We talked about the river, It was approaching dusk, and the sun was just dipping below the tree line, with the hill only slightly lower. "Dave, what do you know about the river here?" someone asked. "I know every square inch of it for 5 miles in either direction," Dave said. "Well, it's 6 to 8 feet deep, moderately moving, and about 1/4 mile across at this location. The trail we just came up generally follows the path of the river, and with a few exceptions due to a rock outcroppings." "So, what the hell was that sound we just heard?" Jeannie asked. "I don't think you're going to like my answer," Dave said. "I believe it was a Sasquatch." "A Bigfeet? Why did you call it a Bigfeet instead of a Bigfoot?" Jeannie went on. Dave responded, "Because they have 2 big feet, not 1 big foot, and it eliminates the awkwardness of searching for a plural term for them." I knew this was not going to be accepted well by Carl, and Carl said, "You know what? Fuck you and your stupid stories. There is no Bigfoot, you hear me?" Bigfoot! Right then, I noticed the sun had dropped below the hill, and the light level was lessening. Carl's father owned the only golf course for 250 square miles, and so his family had some money. Carl was a real redneck, lived in the woods, never saw a thing, too drunk most of the time. But he didn't usually drink until after dark, and was pretty lucid at this moment. And Dave said, "Carl, I'm only telling you this now for your own safety." "You're not in charge of my safety, I am!" Carl screamed. Right then we heard a howl again. Everyone tensed but Carl, and then Carl shouted, "We don't even know what that is. I know it's not a Bigfoot. It's someone fucking with us with a recording and a loudspeaker system, and I'm gonna prove it." To my amazement, my fear, like the others, completely dissipated, wondering just what the hell Carl was gonna do. In 30 seconds, Carl stripped down to his underwear and dived into the river, swimming across. The sun was just behind the hill, and while our location was almost in the shade, the river was still illuminated. Carl made it the 1/4 mile in 4 minutes. When he got out of the river, his underwear was gone. He looked a little like a skinwalker, very skinny but impressive in musculature. Then he crawled up about 4 feet onto a rock next to the river and did some silly dance, naked, with howls, which, he told us upon returning, was his big feet dance. He jumped off the rock right into a swim back, and I swear he made it back in 3 minutes. Now there was just enough light left that someone wouldn't say that it was night time. Carl did a short reprise of his big feet dance, turned towards us all, standing like a naked Superman with his arms folded across his chest, and said, "There's your fucking big feet, Dave, you ignorant asshole." All the fear had completely been erased from all of us, completely, for about 5 seconds. While Carl was standing there like a naked Zeus on the mountaintop, something happened, which lasted no more than 10 seconds, but so entirely paralysed everyone watching with fear that no one could say or do a thing. Out of a ditch behind the hill on which Carl was proudly standing, a creature suddenly visible, but it was still in the ditch. It immediately stepped up behind Carl, who never heard it. It was almost twice the height of Carl and 5 times his weight. It folded its arms and mimicked Carl's pose for maybe 2 seconds. Then it outstretched its right arm to the right above its head and swung its arm in an arc so that its hand connected directly with Carl's head. After what occurred next, it was immediately obvious to everyone watching that there were 2, perhaps more, messages being delivered to us. After Carl's head detached from his body like a ripe walnut from a tree, it sailed perhaps 100 foot through the air and landed on a sandbar shoal just off our closest side of the river. It landed in such a position that it was looking directly at us. Just then, the big feet jumped 1 20-foot step into the river and reached the other side in perhaps 1 minute. Here's the thing though, it took everyone a further minute to register what we'd seen. I used the wrong analogy. Practically everyone has at least seen a great golfer tee up a ball and hit it. After the ball flies, like Carl's head did, the tee flies out and flips around, like Carl's body did, and falls 10 times the length of the tee from where it was hit, also like Carl's body did. His head landing in the sand trap was not lost on us, as we later recounted how Carl's father had cut down old growth forest to make his old golf course. Jeannie's mother had made such a hue and cry about the timber mill's waste into the river, which had derived from Carl's father's cutting all the trees from the woods to clear the land for his golf course. She was ingenious, but a devilish woman, who only had her own best interest in mind. She convinced the town council, with a little extra convincing from Dave's father, in several ways. The solution for the town was to dam up the 2 lakes, as previously mentioned, on the highest point of the river, for the use of the town only, but for the people downriver, who depended on the river for subsistence, food and water for the crops, they not only had less water, but a lot more crap from the timber mill. Percentage speaking, of course. And that was also true for the Big Feet. Yes, Paul's father also stocked the river where it was feasible, and that stayed their fears momentarily, but the Big Feet had a huge appetite, and eventually the residents all took advantage of a buyout deal from the town for their land and left. All except the Big Feet. One bright sunny afternoon that summer, Jeannie took her husband, 2 daughters, and their Great Dane Rex out on the large speedboat of the Great Lake, as they called it. She was there to enjoy her reign as Queen of the Great Lake. As they usually did, Jeannie and her 2 daughters slowly manoeuvred the boat off the launch and continued at about 1/50th the boat's top speed to their throne. The nicest plot on the Great Lake. As usual, Jeannie's husband and Rex disembarked to set up the camp. And by that I mean got out, opened the cabin, brought chairs out and started to grill. Meanwhile, Jeannie and her 2 girls, now 14 and 15, were fishing for the night's dinner, and they were sure not to disappoint, thanks to the efforts of my father. And suddenly, in the midst of a clear summer's day, everything changed. The wind picked up a bit as a cool breeze blew in. A dark and impenetrable cloud was seen very low and just over the slightly elevated peak next to the lake. No one was very much alarmed yet. Suddenly, Rex, the Great Dane, ran to the lake's edge and barked in grave concern, but not towards the boat with Jeannie and her daughters, who were still busy fishing, but at something opposite them on the thin part of the lake. "What the hell is wrong with Rex? What's he barking at?" someone asked. Just then, a large lightning bolt hit a tree at the top of the ridge where Rex seemed to be looking, and Rex pulled his leash free from Jeannie's husband's hand and leaped into the lake as if to go after it. Everyone there scrambled into Jeannie's cabin. And Jeannie and her 2 daughters weren't very far from the shore at the lightning strike, so they grounded the boat, hopped onto shore, and headed for the cabin as everyone else scrambled into it. Rex, their Great Dane, was still swimming across the lake to defeat the lightning when someone said, "Not a very smart dog." That person was right, because it would be the last time anyone would see not only Rex, but Jeannie and her 2 daughters alive. Several more lightning strikes kept everyone else inside the cabin, and then they heard the mightiest, most mournful wail, and then instantly the rain and the lightning ceased. Jeannie's husband darted out of the cabin and saw an empty boat further away in the middle of the lake, drifting away and looking somewhat askew, but Jeannie and her 2 daughters were nowhere to be seen. A quick search of the area revealed nothing. No Jeannie, daughters, or Rex. Everyone in the park began a search around the lake, and Dave's father took his boat out to secure Jeannie's boat and bring it back to the launch, but the boat wouldn't budge. He realised it was tethered to something. It was tethered by Rex's leash, tied underwater to a tree root to Rex's collar, with Rex still in it, and then attached to the heavy-duty fish stinger hanging off the back of the boat. When they pulled Rex out of the water was when they realised that Jeannie and her 2 daughters were also on the stringer. When Dave's father pulled Jeannie and her 2 kids out of the lake and off the stringer, which had been forced through the soft skin underneath their jawbones and out through their mouths, he had absolutely no idea how anything like this could have transpired, while half the town was on the lake, and yet no one saw a thing. All his feeble mind could conclude was that it was the work of a madman, with a contrived plot against the town, and he made no connection to it and what had happened to Carl, and so he took out his 2-way radio and called his son, Dave, whose cabin was just a quarter mile away, and told him to contact the state police and send them to the lake. Dave had had his first drink of the day and was able to do just that. Everyone there was in a state of controlled panic. Rumours flourished. They all abandoned their camping sites and cabins and gathered in what one could only describe as a mob. Someone shouted, "What do we do now, Sheriff?" There was no answer. As every head scanned the area, it became apparent that Dave's father was no longer amongst them. In the rising apprehension, the divers jumped back into the lake, fearing perhaps that a monster had taken them to its depths as well. A small group with guns searched the nearby forest's edge, while the others searched the small grass field next to the lake, and no one was now next to the lake, as all of their campsites continued merrily on without them. After alerting the state police, Dave had just chugged about 6 shots of Tullamore Dew and decided to hop on his four-wheeler and cruise to the lake to see what all the fuss was about. As he exited his cabin, he grabbed the whiskey bottle and his Colt 45 handgun. He had a song stuck in his head all day, and saying it out loud now as he rambled down the path towards the lake. "Why can't we just be friends?" by War. As he arrived at the lake a few minutes later, he was completely befuddled when he saw absolutely no one there on this bright sunny summer's day. Then, for no reason, he switched songs in his head to "Don't Worry, Be Happy" and began whistling the intro. It was just then that he noticed a plume of smoke rising between the trees to his right, obviously coming from one of the built-in grills next to the local big shot's cabin, and so he meandered over to get some information. But he didn't see anyone, as everyone at the lake was out searching for his father. As he rounded the front corner of the cabin towards the grill, he stopped whistling. Whistles were being replaced by screaming, very, very shortly after all the people converged upon Dave at this cabin, and just before they all reached it, they heard 2 gunshots. What they all saw upon arriving, I can guarantee they will never forget. They could not unsee this. First, they saw Dave's corpse on the ground, with not only a hole blown through his chest, but his head too, along with 2 spent shell casings, one sticking out of each nostril. There was no way for them to know that the bottle of Tullamore Dew was gone as well. Someone from the mob loudly asked, "Jim, what the hell are you cooking on your grill? A side of beef?" "I'm not cooking anything yet," Jim said as he walked up to the grill. He grabbed his poker and poked the meaty mass. Just then, Dave's father, perfectly filleted body slid out of his skin onto the ground, masterfully cooked and ready for eating, along with 6 of Jeannie's rainbow trout. About 3 months later, the scrutiny of the press and the exasperation of the town cooled to a point where people were sick of talking about it. What really made the people sick deep inside of everyone was that they could become so sedated to a subject so brutal, and it was really only now that they were becoming clean with the fact of that Big Feet was still out there, and they were all embarrassed because it was like it had just occurred to them all simultaneously, and so they wouldn't even talk about it anymore, and they couldn't see any logic in any of it. Naturally, when I had my experience shortly thereafter, there was just no way I could tell it to anyone, even though it would have given them the answers they so desperately wanted. I never would have survived in there, in that place, and so that's why I'm telling you instead. On that day I heard a knock at my door, and so I went to greet whoever was there, but there was no one there. I looked out and around, confused, and then I looked down, and there was a makeshift basket woven out of sinuous long leaves of my father's rutabaga onion hybrid plant, the Big Red. In it were a Colt 45, Jeannie's fishing reel, and a Titleist 3 golf ball, and it was lovingly adorned with big red flowers. This is how she died. Let's get straight into that. Prelude. September 19th, 2019 was the last time I saw my best friend. How she died? Oh well, let me tell y'all my story. Jane is the most nicest person you'd ever meet in your life. She has a very positive attitude that will brighten your day. As I type this, I'm in tears and regret. She would have been alive by now, if I went with her to Missouri on her so-called expedition. My name is John Davis, and this is my story. We should have headed out late into the summer and spent a week in the wilderness searching for the infamous Bigfoot. But, as usual, my good friend Jane and her spontaneous behaviour changed all of that. Late one night, in a heated argument with a lover, she grabbed her gears and guns and loaded her car, bolting out of town. 24 hours later is when I received a call from her, already on location with a camp set up, waiting on me. I could not believe that she would just go out without even a word. It wasn't until I heard what led to the fast exit that I was understanding. As I drove my old beat-up Chevy through the farmland, I knew this was going to be a special trip. Not only would we possibly find Bigfoot and get it on camera, but we might find a werewolf or something more devious. This was the trip that I would tell her my true feelings for her. As I think back now on how I was such a stupid man for not saying something sooner, as now I will never get the chance to see where it could have taken us. I pulled up to the campsite per the GPS coordinates that were given to me, as I had lost cell service about 50 miles back on a dirt road that led into the forest on State Route 17, in the middle of nowhere. When I say in the middle of nowhere, you are surrounded by dense forest as well as creeks. The camp was, as she had said, all set up and a fire slowly burning. Her perimeter is surrounded by an electric fence with the generator filled with gas. Her Mercedes-Benz SUV is locked. Food storage was tied up into a tree about 20 feet away from her campsite. Trail cam is set up around the area. But where was Jane? She was a hell of a shot with a gun, I thought, as I drew my two 9mm pistols from the side seat and placed them securely in the holsters that were strung from my chest. Could she outshoot me? With a rifle or some massive gun that would lay siege to an army? Yes, but not with these bad boys. I was a beast with these ladies. I looked around at all the tech and hardware that Jane had brought, and it was all state-of-the-art. Where I lacked in firepower and gun experience, I brought tracking and skills that could find her. I shouted her name, and after scouring the camp and not finding her around, her pack was gone from the camp as well as a favourite Ruger Precision 338 Lapua 26 M-Lock rifle. This woman knows her firearms, and I smiled. I knew she had set off. The tracks were fresh and no older than a day. Where in the hell was she? I thought. Looking around, my eyes had to adjust to what little light was out at that time. I glanced off in the distance and saw the brush move. Something large bolted from the tree to tree. My eyes could make out the figure, but not my mind. Well, I knew it wasn't Jane. As I sprinted toward the direction and approached where it had been, it was gone. Searching the ground for animal tracks, there was nothing that resembles anything local to this area. As I placed slowly through the knee-high ferns, brushing them ever so gently out of my way, I froze. Looking down before me on the ground was a print. I dropped to one knee and held out my hand towards it. It was almost 2 times my hand, with fingers stretched out in length. Being a man with large hands and even larger feet, I had never seen a footprint of 24 to 30 inches in length. The thing was almost 2 feet. Each track was spaced almost 6 feet in distances from one another. Holy fucking hell, I remember mumbling. Now, I'm really worried for Jane. It had been almost 2 days now since we had spoke, and around 12 hours since the tracks I'd found earlier had been laid down. The trail was getting cold, and I had to find her soon. Stranger than ever, I thought of something else. There was no bloody sign of Tim, the researcher Jane had met online, who told us of this location. He said to me this here, and Tim was a sketchy individual, in my opinion. His history and online background was very cloudy and patchy. Of course, any man would look up another man before letting the woman he desires run off to meet a strange man from the internet in the wilderness. Not to mention a good friend. I grabbed my sat phone and headed on her trail. The monster, or whatever I had seen, would meet again, but not today. I began stringing on her trail, and now I had worried even more that my nap waiting for Jane might have been what led to her doom. Damn her for leaving without me. Damn her for trusting a random fool on the internet, with only a little background at that. I waited for her on site and the night passed quickly. I dozed off beside the fire pit. Then suddenly it was 6 a.m. and I was awoken of what felt like rocks being thrown at me. I yelled and said, "Stop playing games, Jane. It's too early for this shit. Come on, man. Jane? Jane? Jane?" Nothing. No response. Okay, I told myself. Who would throw rocks at me in the middle of nowhere? The area was definitely silent. I then realised that she did not come back last night. I got up and rushed to where I think she went as she placed a ribbon on the way she was heading out prior. I know because she would do such a thing. As I approached the area, there was this feeling that I started to have. What is that smell? Then I heard rustling sounds from up ahead. I'm being careful. I then found Jane's cell phone on the ground. It was crushed, like someone had broken it. I'm now starting to freak out. She will never leave her cell phone behind. My tummy started to have this funny feeling with chills down my spine. I saw her rifle and lots of empty rounds all over the place. This is not a good sign. This is not good at all. And I'm starting to lose it. As I'm approaching the clearing, I dropped to the ground and I saw her lifeless body to the ground. Her neck was torn apart like some kind of animal attacked her. She had a GoPro still attached to her head, but the battery was empty. I then took it and ran as fast as I could back to camp. I drove back to town when it felt like forever. I called 911 from my sat phone right away and gave them the coordinates. An hour later, they arrived. Tim, was nowhere to be found. And Jane, she's dead. And I know something happened here. I'll get back to you later as I'm trying to explain what had happened here to the cops. Wow. Awesome stuff there from both authors. Thank you so much for your dedication and input and your support. It really does mean the world to me. Guys and girls, as ever, you know the drill. Please do let us know down below in the comments what you thought. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And of course, don't forget to hashtag TeamFEAR. If you haven't subscribed to DMT Forest of Fear, what are you waiting for? Smash the subscribe button and throat punch the notification bell to stay up to date with all DMT content. And as ever guys, I hope you're well and happy. And remember, be safe, not sorry.